This is our first video diving into the rules of Superpowered. And the first set of rules we're going to talk about are before match rules, specifically about equipment. Now, there's a lot of confusion in a lot of seasons about definitions of words. So the one we want to get right now is equipment. And equipment is anything and everything that teams bring to the match. So if it's already on the table when you get there, it's not equipment. If you brought it to the table, it is equipment. So that's a pretty easy, straightforward thing. There's one exception to what this might or might not be, and we'll talk about that later, but 99.99 and even 100% of the time, depending on kind of how nitpicky you want to be about definitions, equipment is anything you bring to the table. So any equipment has to be made by Lego. That's a pretty straightforward rule. If it's made by Lego, you can use it. If it's not made by Lego, you can't use it. And it can't be modified. The only exception is that Lego string and Lego pneumatic tubes may be cut because you might need different lengths of them. Otherwise, it has to be made by Lego, no modifications. If it is a non-electric Lego piece, then it can be from any set. When I was a kid, Bionicles were the move, and they were the best toy out there from Lego, in my opinion. They don't make those anymore, but because it is a Lego set, Bionicle parts would be legal to use in a season, as long as it is not electric. So if you're digging around for Legos, you're like, man, there's this really cool part I want to use, but it's only in this one set. As long as it's made by Lego, you can use it. As long as it is a Lego piece specifically. So talking about electric Lego equipment. So there are only some electrical Lego pieces that are allowed. Most of them are, but we want to get kind of into what is allowed. And so the most common Lego piece you'll use for this is the Lego Spike Prime. It is the main brick, and it is used to store programs, instructions, all that. And this is what the current solution is, and everything is geared towards it. So the Lego Spike Prime, anything that comes with it, is absolutely legal. This is the Lego Spike Essential. You notice it's much smaller. Challenge teams should not be using the Spike Essential for their robot. Now, it says here that the Lego Spike Essential, are allowed. I'm not sure if that's a typo or if they missed a clarification point. If you buy a Lego Spike Essential, it comes with like motors and sensors, and you can definitely use the motors and sensors on your robot. But the Spike Essential, you should not be using for your robot. This should be for a First Lego League Explore team. First Lego League Challenge should be using the Lego Spike Prime. Now, if you're a more veteran team and you haven't upgraded your equipment yet, you might also be using the Lego Mindstorms EV3, which is the brick looks like this. And there's a little bit of a size difference between the two, but they are, for all intents and purposes, equivalent for the competition. You can use the Lego Mindstorms EV3, the NXT. You can even use the RCX or the Robot Inventor. And the Robot Inventor is a retail version or retail equivalent of what is now the Spike. They are very similar products if you look at them. If you are purchasing a new product, the Spike Prime is going to come in the yellow bin like this, and it'll say Spike Prime right there. The Spike Essential comes in a very similar box. You don't want that one for First Lego League Challenge. You want the Spike Prime for First Lego League Challenge. If you are dealing with the Mindstorms EV3, it comes in this black tote here. This is the education version. There is also a retail version, but we do recommend the education version because there's more useful things that come with it. Again, if you have the EV3, more than welcome to use it, but most everything you're going to see is going to be geared toward the Spike Prime. And more electronic pieces, so those refer to your controller. You've also got motors and sensors, and you are allowed limits here. You can have one controller in a match, so only bring one of these to the table each time. You can have up to 4 motors in any one match, so only 4 motors. And then you can have you can only use touch and force, color, distance, and gyro sensors in any match and number in a match. So if you want to have, The Spike Prime supports 6 slots. If you want to have 5 color sensors in one motor, go for it. Nothing's going to stop you. Now in terms of what else you can use LEGO wires. You can use the power bank, or you can use AA batteries. So the Spike Prime has this removable battery pack, but the EV3, my EV3, does also have a removable battery pack. But if you want, you could just use some AA batteries. So that's what that's saying there. But it's also saying, and this may be surprising to some people, this one micro SD card. That doesn't really apply to the Spike Prime. There's nowhere to plug in an SD card of any kind. But the EV3 does have a space for a micro SD card. And so you can take one, like this is the one I have, and you can just pop it in there. And you do that because of Rule 5, and that's that teams can use any software or programming language. So you can use anything to program these you want, as long as it's compatible, right? The Spike app has built-in icon blocks, word blocks, and Python. The EV3 you can use with, I believe, EV3 Classroom or EV3 Lab, and they're just different forms of programming. Or if you load up a micro SD card, you can load up an operating system on this, and you can program this in Robot C, Java, Python, possibly even LabVIEW. There's a bunch of options here. And so this is saying you can do anything there. But the other thing to remember is that the code, the robot has to be autonomous. So you are not allowed to control the robot. And that's only a problem if you buy the EV3 retail kit, because it comes with an infrared sensor that also comes with a little remote controller. This part is not allowed at competitions because it is used to control the robot by pushing buttons. All you're allowed to do is use the buttons on the robot. You can select a program, and then you tell it to do a job, and then it will come back autonomously. Your robot cannot be controlled by you for most of the match, and we'll talk about when it is and when it isn't allowed to. Other things you can bring 1 sheet of notebook paper per home area. There are 2 home areas, which means you can bring 2 pieces of notebook paper, 1 on each side of the table. We'll talk about that later, but this is just for program notes and does not count as your equipment. And finally, additional or duplicate mission models are not allowed. So you can't bring your own mission models from home. There is one exception to this, and it is this piece. This is the display wall from one of the models, and we'll talk about when and why you can bring this to the table from your home set. But otherwise, do not bring additional mission models. So, I've got my big toy dinosaur here from my mission models. It's a great model. I like it a lot. I can't bring it with me to the table. If I have a display wall, I can bring it. We'll talk about why you'd want to do that in a later video. But those are the pre-match rules regarding specifically equipment.